Tonight you wake inside the walls, not with a jolt, but slowly, as if the stone itself has been holding your sleep, and now gently lets it go. And the air feels still, familiar, contained. You breathe in, and it is the kind of air that does not travel far, the kind that has touched the same streets again and again. You sit up, and there is no rush, no urgency, just the quiet sense that everything around you has already decided how this day will be. Outside your window, pale light rests against the stone. Not bright, not sharp, just enough to show the edges of the world you live in. And you realize, without thinking too much, that nothing here moves without being seen. Nothing enters without permission. Nothing leaves without notice. And that thought settles into you, soft, reassuring, almost comforting. You are inside, and inside means protected. At least, that is what it has always meant. You stand, slowly, your feet touching the ground that has held thousands before you. And somewhere, not far, you hear the first distant step of a guard walking along the wall. Steady, measured, always there. And for a moment, you let yourself believe, completely, that nothing can reach you here. Nothing at all. The light grows a little stronger now, sliding gently across the rough surface of the wall, revealing its texture, the uneven cuts, the marks left by hands long gone. And you move closer, not out of curiosity, but because the wall is always there, always present, like something you are meant to feel without questioning. You trace it with your eyes, not your hands, noticing how thick it is, how solid, how unmoving. And there is a quiet comfort in that weight, as if the world outside presses against it, and the wall simply refuses to yield. You can almost imagine it holding back everything you do not see, everything you do not need to think about. And for a moment, that thought is enough. You do not ask what exactly it keeps away. You do not need to. The answer has never been required. Only the feeling, the quiet certainty that something stands between you and whatever might exist beyond. And as the morning settles in, you begin to notice how the light never fully escapes the stone. It only touches it, then stays, as if even the sunlight knows where it belongs. Inside, with you. You hear the guard more clearly now, the slow rhythm of footsteps moving along the top of the wall. Not hurried, not careless, just steady, repeating, as it has every day before this one. And you find yourself listening without trying, letting the pattern settle into your breathing. Step, pause, step, pause. A quiet reminder that someone is always watching, always present, even when you are not looking. And there is comfort in that. A quiet kind of safety that does not need to announce itself. It simply exists, like the walls, like the morning, like the air you breathe. You imagine the guard's path, the same route, the same turns, again and again, never leaving, never wandering beyond what is allowed. And without realizing it, you begin to understand that safety here is not just about protection. It is also about repetition, about knowing exactly where things are, where they will be, where they will remain. And as the footsteps continue, fading slightly as the guard moves farther along the wall, you feel it settle deeper inside you, that steady rhythm, that quiet control, that sense that everything is being held in place, carefully, deliberately, exactly as it should be. The gates begin to open, not all at once, but slowly, with a low, heavy sound that feels older than anyone inside the town. And you turn your head toward it, almost instinctively, as if that sound has always meant the same thing. The start of movement, the beginning of the day, the permission to exist beyond stillness. You do not rush there, No one does. Because the gates have never failed to open before. They do not surprise. They do not hesitate. They simply follow their purpose. And as the gap widens, light from outside slips in. Thin at first, then a little more, touching the ground just inside the entrance. And you notice how people pass through it without stopping, without looking up, as if the boundary between inside and outside is something they no longer question, something that has already been decided for them. And for a moment, you stand still, watching the opening, feeling the quiet assurance it brings, the idea that the world can be controlled, opened, closed, managed, and that as long as it follows this rhythm, you remain safe. Because the gates are not just an entrance, they are a promise. And today, like every day before, that promise is kept. The streets begin to fill, slowly, gently, as if the town is waking in layers, not all at once, and you move with it, without thinking. Your steps matching the quiet flow of others. No one rushing, no one stopping for too long. Just a steady unfolding of daily life. And the sounds are soft, contained, voices kept low, footsteps absorbed by the ground. The kind of noise that never escapes beyond the walls. You pass by familiar corners, the same doorways, the same narrow paths, everything placed exactly where it was yesterday and the day before that, and the certainty of it settles into you. This predictability, this quiet order. It feels like protection in its own way, not just from danger, but from change. And as more people appear, filling the space between buildings, you begin to sense how closely everything is held together, how near everyone is to one another, how little distance exists here, and yet no one seems to notice. Or if they do, they have learned not to think about it, because inside these walls, closeness is normal, expected, even comforting. And you let yourself follow that feeling, letting it carry you forward without question. The market forms without announcement, as it always does, appearing piece by piece until it feels like it was never absent at all, and you find yourself drawn toward it, not out of need, but because it is where the town gathers, where the rhythm of the day becomes visible. Stalls arranged in familiar places, goods set out with practiced hands, everything moving in quiet coordination. And the voices here are still soft, but more present. Small exchanges, brief conversations, nothing that lingers too long. And you notice how people stand close when they speak, how their words stay contained between them, as if even sound is meant to remain inside, never rising high enough to reach the walls. And you move through it slowly, observing without interrupting, feeling the steady pulse of life around you. This contained world, repeating itself again and again. And for a moment, it feels complete, self-sufficient, as if nothing beyond these walls is needed, as if everything that matters is already here, within reach, within sight, within control. And that thought settles quietly into your mind, simple, reassuring. And just beneath it, something else begins to stir. Not strong enough to name, not yet. Just a faint awareness that everything here exists within limits, even this sense of safety. The market settles into a steady rhythm, and you begin to notice the small exchanges more clearly now. Not just the movement of hands and goods, but the quiet patterns between people. The way eyes meet briefly, then look away. The way conversations stay short, contained, as if they are not meant to travel far. You pause near a stall, not to buy, but to listen, to feel the shape of the moment. And there is nothing unusual at first, just the soft trade of daily life. But underneath it, there is a certain carefulness, a subtle restraint, as if everyone understands something without saying it, and you cannot quite name it, only sense it. like a boundary that exists even in speech. And as you continue walking, you realize how naturally you have accepted this, how normal it feels to keep things close, to stay within what is known. And for a moment, you wonder, not with fear, but with quiet curiosity, how far a voice could travel here, if someone chose to let it rise, if it would reach the walls, or if the walls would somehow hold even that inside. You pass by the blacksmith, and the sound of metal striking metal reaches you before the sight does. A steady, repeating note, strong but controlled, never echoing too far, as if even the sharpest sounds are softened within these walls. You slow your steps, watching the movement of the hammer, the sparks that rise briefly, then fade, never lingering. And there is something reassuring in that rhythm, the predictability of it, the certainty that each strike will follow the last, just as it always has. And the blacksmith does not look up, does not pause, fully absorbed in a task that seems to exist outside of time. And you notice how grounded everything feels here, how contained each action is, nothing wasted, nothing reaching beyond its place. And as you stand there for a moment longer, you begin to understand how deeply this town depends on repetition, on routines that do not break, that do not question themselves. Because within repetition, there is stability, and within stability, there is safety, or at least the feeling of it. And you let that thought settle gently, without pushing it further, without asking what might happen if that rhythm were ever to stop. The houses press close together as you move away from the market, their walls nearly touching in places. Narrow paths guiding your steps without offering many choices, and you follow them without thinking, because there is little else to do. The direction is already decided for you, and you begin to notice how little space exists between everything here, how tightly the town holds itself, as if it has drawn inward over time, becoming more contained, more certain of its own boundaries. And in that closeness, there is a quiet sense of belonging, of being part of something that does not leave gaps, does not allow emptiness. And yet, as you continue walking, you feel a small shift in your awareness, a gentle recognition that there is nowhere here to step away, nowhere to stand alone without still being inside the same structure, the same system. And it is not uncomfortable, not yet, just a subtle realization that space itself is limited, shaped by the walls that surround everything. And as you pass another doorway, another familiar corner, you feel it again, that quiet thought returning, softer this time, almost hidden, that everything here is held together, not just by choice, but by design. You notice the children before you hear them, small movements near the base of the wall, their shapes passing in and out of the light, and then the sound follows. Soft laughter, quick footsteps, the kind that never travels far, and you slow without meaning to, watching how they move so close to the stone, as if the wall is just another part of their world, not something to question, not something to fear. They run along it, tracing its length without ever looking up, as if its height has already been accepted, already understood without needing to be measured. And one of them pauses, placing a hand against the surface just for a moment, then continues, as if checking that it is still there, still solid, still doing what it is meant to do. And you find yourself drawn to that gesture, that quiet trust, the assumption that the wall will always remain, always protect, always hold its place. And for a moment, you let yourself feel the same certainty, simple, unquestioned, like something learned long ago and never revisited. And yet, as you watch them disappear around the corner, you notice how none of them ever try to see beyond it. Not once, not even by accident. A distant bell begins to sound, low and steady, its tone moving gently through the streets. Not loud enough to disturb, just enough to be noticed. And you pause, letting it reach you, letting it settle into the quiet rhythm of the town. It does not call for urgency. It does not demand attention. It simply marks the passing of time, as it always has. And you follow the sound without thinking, your steps aligning with its slow repetition, each note fading before the next begins, never overlapping, never rushing. And as you move, you notice how others respond the same way. Slight shifts, small adjustments, nothing dramatic, just a shared understanding that time here moves in measured pieces, controlled, predictable, contained. And the bell continues, unchanged, as if it has no reason to hurry, no reason to break its pattern. Because within these walls, time does not need to escape. It does not need to expand. It simply circles, returning again and again to the same familiar points. And you feel that loop gently wrap around your thoughts, steady, calming, almost enough to keep you from wondering what lies outside of it. The day feels settled now, fully formed, as if it has reached the shape it was always meant to take. And you find yourself standing still for a moment, not because you are tired, but because there is nowhere urgent to go, nothing demanding your attention beyond what is already in front of you. And that stillness feels natural here, not empty, but complete, like a space that does not need to change to remain whole. You look around, taking in the narrow streets, the close walls, the familiar paths that guide everyone without question. And you realize how little has shifted since you woke, how everything has unfolded exactly as expected, without interruption, without surprise. And there is comfort in that, a deep, quiet comfort that settles into your breathing, slows your thoughts, keeps everything steady. And yet, somewhere beneath that calm, there is a faint awareness, barely noticeable, that nothing here seems to allow for the unexpected. Nothing invites it. Nothing leaves space for it to enter. And you do not push that thought further. You let it rest where it is, small, distant, like something that does not yet belong to this day. You find yourself looking up at the wall again, not because anything has changed, but because it is always there, always present. And this time you let your eyes follow its height more carefully, slowly, from the base where it meets the ground, up along the rough stone, past the narrow slits where shadows rest, until it disappears into the brightness above. And for a moment, you try to measure it, not in numbers, but in feeling, in the distance it creates between you and whatever lies beyond. And it feels farther than it looks, heavier than it seems, as if its true size is not just in its height, but in what it prevents you from seeing. And you notice how your gaze never quite reaches the other side. It simply stops, held in place by the surface itself. And there is something quiet in that, something final, like a boundary that does not need explanation, only acceptance. And as you lower your eyes again, you carry that awareness with you, subtle, almost weightless. The sense that the wall does more than stand. It decides where your world ends. The thickness of the wall becomes clearer the longer you stand near it. Not something you would usually notice, but now it begins to take shape in your mind. The depth of it, the layers of stone pressed together, forming something that is not easily crossed, not easily moved. And you imagine what it must feel like to stand on the other side, to face it from beyond, to see this same surface not as protection, but as a barrier. And the thought lingers. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Because you have never needed to consider that view before. Here, inside, the wall has always meant safety, always meant distance from danger. And yet, when you allow yourself to hold both ideas at once, the feeling shifts slightly. Not enough to disturb you, just enough to change the shape of your understanding. That what protects you may also define you. may also limit you. And as that thought settles in, quiet and slow, you realize how rarely anyone here speaks about the wall itself, as if its presence is too constant to question, too accepted to examine. A feeling comes to you, not sudden, not sharp, but gradual, like something that has been forming quietly beneath everything else. And it rests in a simple thought, one that does not demand attention, only recognition. That here, inside these walls, you are protected. And the word feels familiar, almost comforting. Something you have understood for as long as you can remember. Protection means distance from harm. It means structure, control, boundaries that keep the unknown away. And as you stand there, letting that idea settle fully into place, you notice how easily it fits, how naturally it explains everything around you. The routines, the walls, the guards, the order of each day. And for a moment, you allow yourself to accept it completely, without question, without doubt, because it feels right. It feels stable. It feels true. And yet, just beneath that certainty, there is a quiet space where another thought could exist. Not strong enough to take shape, not yet. Just a faint possibility that protection might come with something else, something you have not fully seen. And you leave it there, untouched, as the day continues exactly as it always has. The change is small enough to miss, and yet you feel it before you understand it. A slight shift in the way people move, a hesitation that was not there before. And as you walk back toward the market, you notice a stranger standing near the edge of the crowd, not doing anything unusual, not speaking loudly, just present in a way that does not quite belong. And no one approaches them. No one asks questions. But there is a space around them that feels intentional, as if the town itself has stepped back without needing to be told. You pass by slowly, not staring, but aware. And for a moment your eyes meet theirs, only briefly, just enough to register that they are looking at everything differently, as if they have seen something you have not. And then you move on, because that is what everyone does. No one lingers. No one interrupts the quiet order. And yet, as you continue walking, the feeling remains with you, light but persistent, that something has entered the town without fully becoming part of it. The glances begin after that, subtle at first, easy to overlook. Small shifts in attention that pass quickly from one person to another, and you start to notice how often eyes meet, then turn away a little too fast. How conversations pause when someone else draws near, then resume in a lower voice, as if the space between people has changed without anyone naming it. And you find yourself listening more carefully, not to the words themselves, but to what is missing from them. The parts left unsaid. The gaps where something could have been spoken but was not. And it creates a quiet tension, not sharp, not urgent, just enough to make the air feel slightly different, slightly heavier. And you move through it slowly, adjusting without realizing, lowering your own voice, shortening your own words, as if you have always known to do this, as if the town has taught you how to respond before you even understand why. A whisper reaches you, not directly, but carried through the movement of others, passed from one voice to the next, until it becomes less a sentence and more a feeling, and you catch only fragments of it as you walk. Something about the outside, something about what has been seen beyond the walls, but nothing clear, nothing complete. Just pieces that do not quite form a full picture. And still, they are enough to change the way people stand, the way they look toward the gates, the way they hold themselves just a little more tightly. And you realize that no one is asking for details. No one is demanding certainty. because the whisper itself is already doing its work, already shaping the space inside the town. And you feel it settle into you as well. Not as fear, not yet, but as awareness. The sense that there is something beyond your view that has begun to matter, even if you cannot see it, even if no one can explain it. And as you continue walking, the familiar streets feel the same beneath your feet, but the silence between sounds begins to carry more weight than before. You begin to notice how the words themselves are changing, not what is said, but how it is said. Voices lowered just enough to keep them close, sentences shortened before they can fully form. And when you pass by a small group near the market, you hear it more clearly, a phrase slipping out between pauses. Something beyond the walls. Then nothing more. The rest swallowed by silence. And no one presses for answers. No one asks the question that feels closest. Because it seems understood that asking too much would only make it more real. And you continue walking, letting those unfinished words follow you. Not heavy, not urgent, just present. Like a thought that has not yet decided what it wants to become. And for the first time, you find your attention drifting outward, toward the idea of what lies beyond. Not with fear, but with a quiet curiosity that does not fully belong to you, as if it has been placed there, gently, without your permission. The market feels slightly different now, though nothing visible has changed. The same stalls, the same goods, the same familiar arrangement. And yet the space between people seems to hold more than before, as if something invisible has settled in, something shared but not spoken. And you notice how voices drop when certain words are approached, how sentences shift direction before reaching the point, and you begin to understand that the rumor does not need clarity to spread. It moves through suggestion, through absence, through the quiet agreement that something is wrong, even if no one can define it. And as you pass from one stall to another, you feel yourself adjusting again, listening more than speaking, observing more than engaging, as if the town itself has entered a softer state. Not calm, not quite, but controlled, careful, and beneath it, there is a growing sense that everyone is waiting for something, though no one knows what that something will be. When you draw closer to the gates, you see the guards before anything else changes. Their posture slightly more alert, their movements more deliberate. Small differences that would have gone unnoticed before, and you slow your steps, watching how each person who approaches is observed a little longer than usual, not stopped, not questioned, just seen more clearly, as if the act of looking has taken on new importance. And the gates themselves remain open, unchanged. The same wide passage between inside and outside. And yet the feeling around them has shifted. No longer just an entrance, but something being watched, measured, considered. And you stand there for a moment, not too close, just within view. And you realize how rarely you have paid attention to this place before. How easily you accepted its function, without thinking about what it might become. And as a few people pass through, moving in and out without interruption, you notice the guard's eyes follow them just a little longer than necessary. And that small detail stays with you, quiet but persistent, as you turn away, carrying the sense that the boundary between inside and outside has begun to matter more than it did yesterday. You notice it later than you should, the way the light begins to fade from the gate earlier than expected. Not because the sun has changed, but because the doors are already moving, slowly drawing inward, and the sound reaches you again, that low, heavy shift of wood and iron, familiar, but now arriving too soon. And people nearby pause, just for a moment, not long enough to question, only long enough to register that something is different. And then they continue, because no one wants to be the first to react.
No one wants to give the moment more meaning than it already holds. And you stand there, watching the space narrow, watching the outside become a thinner and thinner line of light until it is almost gone. And when the gates finally meet, closing with a quiet finality, the street does not erupt. No one speaks loudly, but something settles over the space, something heavier than silence. The simple realization that the day has ended before it should have. You remain near the gate for a while, longer than you intended, watching the surface where the opening used to be, now sealed, solid, unquestioned. And people begin to drift away from it, slowly, as if nothing needs to be said, as if the meaning of the moment has already been understood without explanation. And you follow them, after a time, not because you want to leave, but because there is nothing left to see. The boundary has closed, and with it, whatever connection there was to the outside has been quietly removed. And as you walk back through the streets, you notice how the rhythm of the town continues, almost unchanged. The same voices, the same movements, the same routines. And yet, beneath it, there is a subtle awareness that something has shifted, that a door has been closed earlier than expected, and no one has been told why. And that absence of explanation lingers longer than the sound of the gate itself.
As you move deeper into the town, you see someone standing at a distance, just within sight of the gate. Not inside, not outside, but caught in that brief moment before it closed. And the image returns to you slowly. The way they hesitated. Just a step too far away. Just a second too late. And how the gate did not pause for them, did not wait, did not acknowledge their presence. It simply continued, following its own timing, its own rule. And now, that person is no longer there, not visible, not mentioned, as if their absence has already been absorbed into the quiet order of the town. And you realize how easily that moment passed, how quickly it was accepted. No voices raised, no attempts made, just a continuation of what must be. And as that thought settles in, you feel a slight shift in your understanding. Not sharp, not alarming, just enough to notice that the gates do not open or close for individuals. They move according to something else, something larger, something that does not need to explain itself. And for the first time, that realization stays with you longer than you expect. The image of the closed gate remains with you as the evening settles, not sharply, not insistently, just present in the background of your thoughts. And as you move through the streets, you begin to notice how no one speaks about it directly. Not the early closing, not the person left behind. Nothing is named, nothing is questioned. And yet, something has changed in the way people carry themselves. A quiet awareness that does not need words. And you feel it in the spaces between conversations, in the pauses that last just a little longer than before, as if everyone is holding the same thought, but choosing not to give it shape. And you follow that pattern without realizing, keeping your own thoughts contained, letting them remain unfinished, because here, it feels easier to accept what happens than to ask why it happens. And as that understanding settles in, soft and steady, you begin to see how the town maintains its calm, not by removing uncertainty, but by never fully acknowledging it. The night arrives quietly, as it always does. The light fading evenly across the stone, the streets dimming into softer shapes, and you find yourself listening more closely than before, not to anything specific, but to the absence of what you expected. No late footsteps near the gate, no distant movement from beyond, only the contained sounds of the town itself, and even those seem reduced, as if the entire place has lowered its voice. And you walk a little slower now, your attention drawn to the edges of things, the corners where light fades, the spaces where sound does not quite reach. And in that quiet, you begin to feel the presence of the walls more strongly. Not as something you see, but as something that defines the limits of everything you can hear, everything you can sense. And it creates a strange kind of stillness, not entirely comforting, not entirely unsettling, just different enough to notice. And you let that feeling settle into your breathing, slow, steady, contained, like the town itself.
The whispers return, softer now, more careful than before, carried through doorways, through narrow streets, through the spaces where voices do not travel far, and you catch them in fragments again. Pieces that seem familiar but never complete. Outside, something moving. Then silence, as if the rest has been deliberately left out. And you realize how little anyone needs to say for the meaning to spread. How the absence of detail allows the thought to grow on its own, filling the gaps with whatever it chooses. And you feel that process begin inside you as well. Not as fear, not fully, but as a quiet expansion of the unknown, something that takes shape without permission. And as you continue walking, the town feels the same beneath your feet, the same narrow paths, the same solid walls. And yet, the sense of certainty you held earlier begins to shift, just slightly, as if something has entered the space without crossing the gates, something that does not need an opening to exist within these walls. The whispers do not grow louder. They only spread wider, moving through the town without ever rising above a certain level. And you begin to notice how easily they pass from one place to another, carried not by urgency, but by repetition, each person adding nothing new, only passing along what was already uncertain. And in that way, the rumor begins to feel less like information and more like atmosphere. Something that settles into the air itself, something you breathe without realizing. And as you move through the streets, you feel it around you, shaping the way people stand, the way they pause before speaking, the way they choose their words carefully, even when those words do not say much at all. And you begin to understand that clarity is no longer important here. What matters is the shared sense that something exists beyond the walls, something undefined, something that does not need to be seen to have an effect. And as that thought settles in, it feels strangely stable, as if uncertainty itself has become part of the town's order. The possibilities begin to take form, not in clear images, but in quiet suggestions that move through conversation without ever settling, and you hear them as you pass. Small pieces that do not connect. Bandits, illness, travelers who did not return. Each one offered softly, then left behind, as if no one wishes to hold on to any single version for too long. And you notice how easily your mind receives them, how naturally it begins to fill the gaps between these fragments, creating shapes that were never fully described. And you do not try to stop it, because here, it feels normal to let thoughts remain unfinished, to let them exist without confirmation. And as you continue walking, you realize that no one is searching for the truth. No one is trying to resolve the uncertainty, because the uncertainty itself has already changed everything. It has already altered the way the town feels, and that change does not require proof to remain. You notice, quietly, that no one seems to know anything for certain, and yet everyone behaves as if something is known, something understood without being spoken. And this shared uncertainty creates a strange kind of agreement, an unspoken alignment that moves through the town without direction. And you feel yourself becoming part of it, adjusting your own thoughts to match the pattern around you, accepting the absence of answers without resistance.
And as you walk, you begin to see how this works. How a place can hold together not through clarity, but through collective acceptance of the unknown. And it settles into you gently, not as confusion, but as a new kind of awareness, that knowledge is not always required for belief, and that belief, once shared, can shape the world just as strongly as any visible truth. And as that realization lingers, soft and steady, you continue moving through the town, carrying the same quiet understanding as everyone else, that something exists beyond the walls, even if no one can say exactly what it is. Morning returns, but not in the way you expect. The light arrives, soft and pale, touching the stone as it always does. Yet something does not follow, and you feel it before you see it. A pause where there should be movement, a stillness where there should be sound. And when you turn your attention toward the gate, you realize it remains closed. Not partially, not waiting, but fully shut, as if the day has begun without needing to open it at all. And people notice. Of course they do. But no one reacts immediately. No one rushes forward. They simply look, then look away, as if waiting for someone else to explain. And when no explanation comes, the moment stretches, quietly, settling into the rhythm of the morning. And you stand there for a while, longer than you did yesterday, watching the unmoving surface. And for the first time, the gate feels less like a promise and more like a decision that has already been made without you. The guards are already in place, more than before, or perhaps they simply feel more present now, their steps slower, more deliberate, their attention fixed on the space around them rather than beyond. And you notice how they do not speak, not to each other, not to the people who pass nearby, their silence forming a kind of barrier of its own, one that does not need stone or iron to exist. And as you watch them, you begin to understand that their role has shifted, not outward, but inward. No longer just watching what might come from outside, but observing what remains within. And that realization settles into you gently, without force, just enough to change the way you see them. And when one of them glances in your direction, briefly, without expression, you feel it linger a moment longer than it should, not as a threat, but as a reminder that the space inside the walls is no longer as simple as it once seemed. Questions begin to form, quietly, in the spaces where conversation once flowed easily, but they do not rise fully into words. They remain incomplete, shared through looks, through pauses, through the subtle shift in how people stand near one another, and you sense them around you, the same unspoken thoughts moving from one person to the next. Why is it still closed? How long will it remain? But no one asks directly. No one steps forward to seek an answer, because there is a quiet understanding that answers may not come, or worse, that asking might change something that no one is ready to face. And you feel that hesitation within yourself as well, the instinct to remain still, to observe rather than question, to stay within the pattern that has always kept the town stable. And yet, as the morning continues without the gate opening, that pattern begins to feel slightly incomplete, as if one piece has been removed, and everything else must now adjust around its absence. The waiting becomes part of the morning, settling into the spaces where movement used to begin, and you notice how people linger a little longer than usual, standing near corners, near doorways, near the path that leads to the gate, as if expecting something to change without needing to ask for it. And yet nothing does. The gate remains still, the guards remain silent, and the town continues, but with a slight hesitation in every step. And you feel it in yourself as well, that small pause before moving, that quiet awareness that something is missing from the rhythm, something that used to mark the start of the day,
and now does not. And as you look around, you begin to see how everyone is adjusting, slowly, carefully, reshaping their routines to fit around this absence, not resisting it, not questioning it, simply allowing it to become normal. Because here, normal is not what has always been, but what continues without interruption.
The market opens again, though it feels different this time. Not in its appearance, the stalls are placed as they always are, the goods arranged with the same care, but in the way people move through it, more slowly, more quietly, as if each action is being considered before it happens. And you walk among them, noticing how conversations are shorter now, how voices rarely rise above a murmur, and even the smallest exchanges seem to carry more weight, as if words must be chosen carefully, not because they are dangerous, but because they matter more than they did before. And you sense a kind of restraint in the air, a shared decision to keep things controlled, to avoid letting anything grow beyond what can be contained. And as you pass from one stall to another, you feel that restraint settle into you as well, guiding your steps, shaping your thoughts, until the entire space feels quieter. Not empty, but held back, as if something is being deliberately kept from expanding. You begin to notice the changes in value, small at first, almost easy to miss. A price spoken a little higher than before, an item exchanged with a bit more hesitation, and no one comments on it. No one points it out, but the shift is there, moving quietly through the market like everything else. And you realize how quickly people adapt, how naturally they accept these changes without needing to question them, as if adjustment itself is part of survival here, part of maintaining the balance that keeps everything steady. And you watch as a transaction takes longer than it should, both sides pausing, considering, then agreeing without fully speaking their thoughts. And it becomes clear that uncertainty has begun to affect even the smallest parts of daily life. Not dramatically, not visibly, but in ways that accumulate, building slowly beneath the surface. And as you continue walking, you feel that accumulation growing, subtle but persistent. The sense that the town is beginning to shift, not all at once, but in quiet, measured steps that no one can fully stop. You begin to notice the absences before anyone speaks of them. Small at first, easy to overlook. A doorway that remains closed longer than usual. A stall that does not open when it should. And you pass by without stopping, because no one else stops. No one calls attention to what is missing. And yet the gaps remain, quiet and visible, shaping the space in subtle ways. And as you move through the street, you realize how familiar these places were, how easily you recognized them before, and now their absence feels different. Not loud, not alarming, just present in a way that does not resolve. And you feel a quiet awareness settle into you, that something is changing without being announced, without being explained. And the town continues, adjusting around what is no longer there, as if it has learned to carry on, without needing to account for what disappears. The doors begin to close earlier now, not all at once, not in any coordinated way, but gradually, one after another, until the streets feel narrower than they did before, and you notice how the light changes as it reflects off fewer open spaces, how the movement of people becomes more contained, more deliberate, and you walk more slowly, not because you need to, but because the town itself seems to have slowed, its rhythm tightening, drawing inward, and you feel that pull as well, that quiet suggestion to remain closer, to stay within what is known, what is visible. And as you pass by another closed door, you sense how the boundary between inside and outside is no longer just at the walls. It has begun to exist within the town itself, shaping how people move,
how they choose where to be and where not to be.
The voices behind you shift as you walk, not following you, but changing in tone, dropping lower, becoming harder to distinguish. And you catch fragments again, pieces that feel more deliberate now, more cautious. They say someone tried to leave. Then silence, as if the rest should not be spoken, and you do not turn around, you do not ask, because the pattern has already been set. Information comes in parts, never complete, never confirmed, and yet it is enough. Enough to shape the way people think, the way they behave, and you feel that influence within yourself as well. The way your thoughts begin to fill the gaps, creating meaning where none has been fully given. And as you continue walking, the street feels the same beneath your feet, the same stone, the same path. And yet the space around you carries something new, something quieter but more persistent. The sense that the town is beginning to hold not just people, but their uncertainty as well. The story reaches you in pieces, as all things do now, carried not by a single voice, but by many, each one leaving something out, and you begin to understand it without ever hearing it fully. Someone tried to climb the wall during the night, not through the gate, not with permission, but quietly, alone. And the image forms in your mind slowly. The height of the stone, the darkness, the effort it would take to leave. And you do not know if they succeeded. No one says that part. No one confirms what happened after. Only that they are no longer seen. And the absence of that answer lingers more than any detail could. And as you walk, you notice how this story settles into the town, not causing panic, not creating noise, but shaping the way people look at the wall, at the guards, at each other. And for the first time, the idea of leaving no longer feels abstract. It feels possible. And because it feels possible, it also feels controlled. You begin to listen to the night more carefully, even before it arrives, anticipating the sounds that might come, the ones you did not notice before. And when darkness settles over the town, it feels thicker than it used to. Not because it has changed, but because you are paying attention now, and the smallest noises become clearer. Footsteps in the distance, a door closing somewhere unseen, the faint movement of someone passing through a narrow street. And you realize how contained these sounds are, how they never travel far, how they remain within the boundaries set by the walls. And as you stand still for a moment, you feel that containment more strongly than ever. The sense that everything here is held in place, even the quiet, even the darkness. And it creates a strange kind of awareness. Not fear, not yet, but a recognition that nothing inside the town moves without being part of the whole, without being noticed in some way, even if no one speaks of it. Sleep does not come as easily now, not because you are restless, but because your awareness has shifted. Your mind moving through the same thoughts again and again, gently, without urgency, returning to the gate, to the wall, to the story that was never fully told. And you lie still, listening to the quiet around you, noticing how even in silence, there is a structure, a pattern that holds everything together. And you begin to understand how deeply you have relied on that pattern, how much of your sense of calm has come from knowing what will happen next. And now, with that certainty slightly altered, your thoughts take longer to settle, moving slowly, carefully, as if searching for a place to rest. And as you breathe, steady and soft, you feel that search continue. Not pressing, not demanding, just present, like the town itself, holding everything within its boundaries, including the parts of you that no longer feel entirely at ease. You wake without fully realizing that you have slept, as if the night never quite released you. And the quiet feels closer now, more present in the space around you, not empty but held, contained in a way that makes even your breathing feel like part of something larger.
and you sit still for a moment, listening, noticing how the sounds of the town return slowly, carefully, as if they too are adjusting to something that has not been spoken. And when you step outside, the streets are already moving, but not with the same ease as before. Each motion feels measured, each step placed with quiet intention, and you follow that rhythm without resistance, because it is easier to move with what already exists than to question it. And as you walk, you realize how natural this has become, how quickly the change has settled into the shape of the day, until it no longer feels like change at all, only a new version of what has always been.
The air feels heavier, not in weight, but in presence, as if it carries more than it did before. And you notice it in the way people move around one another, leaving slightly more space, speaking slightly less. And even when nothing is said, there is a shared awareness that fills the silence between them. And you walk through it slowly, letting that awareness pass over you, not resisting it, not trying to define it, because it does not need a clear form to exist. It is already shaping everything around you. And as you pass by a group standing near a doorway, you see how they pause when someone approaches, how their conversation softens until it disappears entirely, and then resumes only after the moment has passed. And it becomes clear that the town is no longer just quiet. It is careful. Each action considered, each word contained, as if something unseen has begun to influence even the smallest parts of daily life. And still, beyond all of this, the outside remains unknown, unchanged in its distance, untouched by everything happening within the walls. And you realize how little has actually been confirmed. No clear sign, no visible proof of danger, nothing you can point to and say, this is why the gates remain closed. And yet, the town has already changed, already adjusted itself to something that may or may not be real. And that realization settles into you slowly, not as doubt, but as a quiet question that does not need to be answered, only held. But what you fear does not always need to exist to have power. And as you continue walking, the walls feel the same beneath your gaze. The streets remain familiar beneath your steps. And yet the meaning of them has begun to shift. Not because of what is outside, but because of what has formed within. The town grows quieter, not suddenly, not all at once, but in a way that feels deliberate, as if each person has chosen, without speaking, to take up less space, to make less sound. And you notice how even simple movements are softened now, footsteps lighter, voices reduced to near silence. And as you walk, you feel that quiet surround you, not empty, but full of something unspoken, something shared. And you begin to understand that this is not the absence of noise, but the presence of caution, a collective decision to remain unnoticed, even within a place where everyone is already known. And as that realization settles in, you feel yourself adjusting again, your own steps slowing, your own breathing becoming more measured, as if the town is gently guiding you into its new shape. You see it in the way people avoid each other's eyes now, not out of distrust, but out of something quieter, something closer to restraint, as if looking too long might reveal something that no one is ready to face. And when glances do meet, they pass quickly, leaving behind a sense of recognition without connection. And you move through these moments without stopping, understanding without needing to think about it, that this is how things are now, this careful distance, this subtle separation that exists even in closeness. And as you continue walking, you realize how different it feels from before, when proximity meant comfort, when being surrounded meant being safe. And now, that same closeness carries something else, something harder to define. A quiet tension that remains just beneath the surface, never rising, but never fully disappearing. The doors close more often, more firmly, the sound of wood meeting wood echoing softly through the narrow streets. And you begin to notice how frequently it happens. How many spaces are now sealed from within, not by force, but by choice. And as you pass by, you sense the separation growing. Each closed door creating a smaller world inside the larger one, and you realize how the town is beginning to divide itself. Not visibly, not completely, but in subtle ways that shape how people live, how they interact, how they protect what is theirs. And as that thought settles in, you feel a shift in your understanding of the walls. No longer just the boundary around the town, but something reflected within it, repeated in smaller forms. Each door, each space, each decision to close off from what lies beyond. And you continue walking, slowly, through a place that feels both familiar and increasingly distant at the same time. You begin to look for paths without meaning to. Your eyes tracing the edges of the streets, the narrow turns, the places where one passage meets another. And you notice how every route leads back inward, how each direction eventually returns you to the same contained space. And you follow one of them slowly, not searching, only observing, letting your steps carry you until the walls appear again, unchanged, unmoving. And you pause there, studying the surface more carefully than before, noticing the height, the thickness, the absence of any easy hold. And for a moment, you imagine what it would take to leave. Not just the effort, but the permission, the possibility. And the thought lingers, quiet and incomplete, because there is no clear answer, only the realization that every path you walk has already been shaped to remain inside. You continue along the edge of the wall, your steps slower now, more deliberate, and you begin to see it clearly. There is no opening here, no hidden passage, no place where the structure gives way. Only solid stone extending beyond what you can follow, and the more you look, the more certain it becomes. That leaving is not simply difficult, it is not part of the design. And you let that understanding settle into you, not as resistance, but as recognition. That the town has been built to contain, to define, to hold everything within its boundaries. And as that thought takes shape, you feel the space around you shift slightly, not physically, but in meaning. The wall no longer just something that keeps things out, but something that keeps everything in, including you. The height of the wall feels different now, not because it has changed, but because you are seeing it without the comfort you once placed on it. And you lift your gaze slowly, following it upward, until it disappears into the light above. And for the first time, it does not feel distant. It feels close, present. Something that exists not just around you, but over you, defining the limits of what you can reach. And you stand there for a moment, letting that awareness settle, not resisting it, not pushing it away, only allowing it to exist. And as you lower your eyes again, you begin to understand that the wall has always been the same, unchanged, constant. It is your understanding of it that has shifted quietly, gradually, until it no longer feels like protection alone, but something more complex, something that does not need to move to hold you in place. You find yourself near the gate again, though you do not remember choosing this path, as if your steps have been guided by something quiet and steady. And when you arrive, nothing has changed. The doors remain closed, the surface unbroken, the guards in their places, and yet the space feels heavier than before, not with sound, but with meaning. And you stand at a distance, looking at the place where the town once opened outward, where movement once passed freely between inside and outside. And now, there is only stillness, a boundary that does not shift, does not explain itself. And as you remain there,
You begin to feel the absence more clearly than the presence. The absence of choice, of direction, of the simple act of leaving. And it settles into you slowly, not as fear, but as understanding, that what once felt like a doorway has become something else entirely.
The guards move differently now, not in large ways, not in anything that could be easily named, but in the small details, the way they stand closer together, the way their attention remains fixed within the town rather than beyond it. And you notice how their role has shifted completely, no longer watching for what might come from outside, but for what might happen inside. And that realization rests with you quietly, changing the way you see them, not as protectors of the boundary, but as keepers of it. And as one of them turns slightly, their gaze passing over the street, over the people, over you, you feel that attention linger just long enough to be felt, not threatening, not direct, but present. And it leaves behind a simple understanding that the structure of the town is not only held by stone, but by those who ensure it remains as it is. You begin to understand it without needing to name it. The feeling that has been forming since the gate first closed. That quiet shift in meaning that has moved through every part of the town. And as you stand there, looking at the walls, the streets, the people moving carefully within them, it becomes clear that leaving is no longer just difficult. It is not expected, not intended. And that realization settles into you gently, without force, because it does not arrive as a sudden thought, but as something that has been building, piece by piece, moment by moment, until it feels complete, and you allow it to rest there. This new understanding of what it means to be inside, that safety, as it has always been defined here, comes with something else, something that does not announce itself, something that reveals itself only when you begin to look closely enough to see it. And for the first time, you feel it fully, not as a question, not as a distant thought, but as a quiet certainty that you cannot leave. Not today, not easily, perhaps not at all. And the realization does not arrive with panic. It comes slowly, settling into your breathing, into the way you stand, into the way you look at the walls around you. And you let it be there, without resisting it, without trying to change it. Because here, resistance has no clear direction, no path to follow. And as you remain still, you notice how everything continues. The town moving in its careful rhythm, the people adjusting, the walls standing unchanged. And you understand with a quiet clarity that nothing needs to happen for this to remain true. Nothing needs to be enforced loudly, because the structure itself is enough. The design itself is enough, and you are already within it. Night returns once more, soft and steady, wrapping the town in the same quiet darkness as before. And you find yourself drawn to the wall again, moving without urgency, without intention, until you stand near its base, looking upward into the dim outline of stone, and beyond it, there is only darkness. No movement, no sign, nothing that confirms the stories, nothing that proves what has been feared. And you remain there, letting your eyes rest on that absence, noticing how little you truly know about what lies beyond, how everything you have felt has come from within these walls, shaped by whispers, by silence, by the slow changes of the town itself. And as that realization settles in, you feel a quiet shift, not in the world around you, but in the way you understand it, that the danger you imagined may not be something you have seen, but something you have learned to feel, here, inside, where everything is contained. You stay there a little longer, letting your eyes adjust to the darkness beyond the wall, and slowly you begin to see that there is nothing moving. No distant fire, no shifting shapes, no signs of anything approaching. Only stillness,
deep and uninterrupted. And it feels different from the stillness inside the town. Not held, not contained, but open in a way you have not felt for some time. And you realize how unfamiliar that openness has become, how difficult it is to understand something that does not press back against you. And as you continue to look, you begin to notice that the fear you expected to feel does not fully arrive. It lingers at the edge of your thoughts, uncertain, as if waiting for something to confirm it. And when nothing does, the feeling begins to soften, leaving behind a quiet awareness that what lies beyond may not be as defined as what has been built within.
You lower your gaze slowly, turning back toward the town.
And everything remains as it has been. The same walls, the same narrow streets, the same quiet movements of people within them. And yet, the contrast settles into you more clearly now. The difference between what is known and what is assumed. And you begin to understand how much of your sense of safety has come from structure, from boundaries that give shape to your world, and how easily that structure can also shape your thoughts, guiding them, limiting them, keeping them within certain paths. And as you stand there, you feel that understanding settle deeper, not as a rejection of the town, but as a recognition of what it truly is. A place that defines itself not only by what it protects, but by what it prevents you from seeing.
The thought forms quietly, almost without words, that nothing you have feared has been proven, nothing you have imagined has been confirmed, and yet everything has changed. The way people move, the way they speak, the way they understand their place within these walls. And you feel that change within yourself as well. The way your perception has shifted, the way your awareness has expanded, without anything visible needing to occur. And it becomes clear that the power of the town does not come only from its stone, but from the shared belief in what it represents, the acceptance of its boundaries, the trust in its purpose. And as that realization settles in, it does not disturb you. It simply remains, steady and quiet, like the walls themselves, shaping everything without needing to move. And as the night deepens, you allow your thoughts to slow, to soften, to settle into the stillness around you. And one idea remains, simple and complete, that the walls have always done two things at once. They have kept something out, and they have kept something in. And you have lived within that balance without needing to see it, without needing to question it, until now. And as you stand there, breathing slowly, feeling the quiet weight of the town around you, you understand that safety is not a single thing. It is a shape, a structure, a boundary that holds you gently in place, and you do not resist it. You do not try to change it. You simply let the thought rest, soft and steady, as everything around you remains exactly as it is. The walls standing, the town quiet, and you still inside, exactly where you have always been.